So just gently we get into movement by turning. We commence with turning. So what is it that makes me turn? My eyes' desire for novelty. So my eyes are creeping around the room, scanning the new as I leave behind the old. So that lovely John Cage quote, which I shall paraphrase, when you really listen, there's no room for thinking. So what we want to do is sort of listen with the eyes. So instead of what you're seeing sparking off a thinking process, it's almost like a sense of marveling. You're just marveling at what's there in front of your eyes. And it just stuns the mind into silence. And then let's just try just tipping. Just really feeling one side stretching, the other side contracting. So when the mind wanders, becomes distracted, you lose your vision. You lose your destiny, your uniqueness. Okay, so let's just try just a few more twisting. So we just want to feel the spine just becoming more and more vertical. So despite our responsibilities, despite the weight upon our shoulders, the thymus is not extinguished, it's sort of licking upwards. So the flame of the thymus is the part of you that refuses depression. And that's what I would call your nobility. So I woke up this morning with a phrase resounding in my skull. See if I can remember it. Sacrificing the self on the altar of nobility. I then had to figure out what it meant. I'd been reading a book the day before on like the poetic resonances of the skeleton. It's like the sort of spiritual meaning of the bones, really. It's a wonderful book. I'll send it to you. And particularly about the sternum, you know, the sternum, this bone here. So it's got the heavy protruding bit, which is like your fierce bravery, your courage. And it's got the sword, the blade of the sword underneath. And then it's got this little handle. And for me, that hilt, the heavy bit, that's the altar of nobility. So your nobility sits on top of that. So we can just sort of locate it. So if you just gently put your fingers just on top of the sternum. So feel the heavy bit, the bit that sticks out, the bit that you tend to lead with when you walk forwards. And it's just on top of that, that's where your thymus flickers up from. And just by putting your fingers there, it will stimulate it. So that's what tends to get crushed and extinguished by normal living. And it shouldn't. It's because our normal lives are dominated by anxiety, by the thinking mind. So what the thinking mind tries to do is reduce the infinity of nature to the finitude of the artificial, of the man-made. So it's constantly reducing infinity to the finite. So it's reducing the world to countability, really. And so I think it was reading Badiou, and, you know, because he's interested in infinite sets, you know, from mathematics. And he was saying that, you know, we tend to think that, you know, everything's finite and infinity is just the realm of mathematics, he says, but actually everything is infinite, and it's man that reduces the infinite to the finite. So when if you look at, you just pick up something, you can see it's infinite. You know, you'd never get to the bottom of it. the thinking mind just is constantly trying to reduce the world so that it can understand it. Yeah, that's why, my mind was blown by that Biko quote that I sent. The rational metaphysics versus the imaginary metaphysics. So the poetic and the prosaic. So here, we want this to be always lifting upwards. And it's like, it doesn't matter who I work with and how strong and proud they are. It's never enough. Because basically, we just don't have the right minds. We just don't have the right subtlety to be able to get anything right. It's depressing, really. And so it's like, when you tell a student, okay, sit up straight, sink and relax, basically, they just get it all wrong, because really, you can't put yourself in the correct posture. It all depends upon how you get there. So this is why, someone can copy the teacher, can say, oh yeah, I need to get my bum in, I need to sort of pull my chin in, and it will be completely wrong because it's not relaxed. So what we want to feel is the connection between this point here, the thymus, the upper sternum, and the sacrum. These are really the two most important bones, really. So the sacrum for the root and the sternum for the heart. And there's a feeling that they're sort of directly connected, that the sacrum is beneath the sternum. Maybe it's not physically, if you looked at it from the side, maybe it's not, but it feels like it is. So what I'm beginning to realize more and more is that, in a sense, it's the sacrum that's more important than the dantian. If you can get the sacrum underneath the sternum, then this lifting energy, which is what we're working for, really, that's why we sink and relax. We sink and relax so that the ground will release its lifting energy through us. Then that's when it sort of falls into place, when you get those two in vertical alignment. Okay, now let's just bring both hands gently onto the sacrum. So just feel it. And you just want a light touch, a light compassionate touch. So just feel the sacroiliacs. And feel that it sort of reaching down into the tailbone. Yeah, so what we'd like to feel is that as soon as you start waking up the sacrum with touch, the sternum also starts waking up. So the spine starts sort of unraveling. The spine tends to be sort of curled up like this, and there's no end to the unraveling, really. But by working on my sacrum, very, very gently, just with my awareness, really, it will just allow the flame of the thymus just to sort of burn a little bit more strongly, reaching up into my head. And then your head becomes like, like that Blake image of the sort of the naked man with the head that's become the sun. I'm not sure, it's probably Adam before the fall. So this sense that your head is radiating this energy that's really just come up the spine, ignited by the thymus, and is now glowing in the head. Well, like, you remember the Teletubbies? I used to love that. And the sort of the sun was a child's smiling face. That's really inspired. And then just bring the hands up and just to where the min meng is. Yeah, so you can just use one hand or both. Yeah, so it's just like a couple of vertebrae of the lumbar spine up from the sacrum. It's the deepest curve, really. And just feel, just feel it, just feel the mood associated with all of these places. This is what's important. So the sacrum, despite its density and its size and its heaviness, no one really, the full name for it is sacrum os, which means sacred bone. And no one really knows why it was called the sacred bone. But they think one of the reasons was because it's so thick and dense, it's the part of you that decomposes last. So they figured that must be the bit that you're regrown from in the resurrection, when all the good people come back to life. So when you're touching that, it's quite tender. And it's like a part of you that you're not normally aware of, so it's sort of novel. And then when you come up to the min meng, that's got a sort of power to it, because it's sort of in the middle and it's tying everything together. It's tying the lower body and the upper body together. It's that sort of threshold juncture. Okay, now let's just breathe from there. So just trying to get the min meng, just moving backwards and in a bit by flexing and extending the spine, and also with the breathing. So just breathing in and then breathing out. And just really trying to get energy sort of whipping up the spine on the extension. So I breathe in. So as you flex, it's almost like the vertebrae separate a little bit, and you can almost get your finger inside the joint. And then just bring your hand just a little bit higher to basically where the lumbar spine and the thoracic spine join up. Yeah, so that tends to be the place where we start to collapse a little bit, really. So that bit, especially on me and on a lot of the people that I work with, it just needs to come in. So that joint between the lumbar and the thoracic spine needs to be almost, like there's no discontinuity there. And you can feel that when that sort of drift comes in a little bit, that's when this rises in the right way. So you want the sternum to lift, not because you're thrusting your chest up in the air, but because something is happening in the lower spine. in the sacrum, and in this place where we've now got the hand. Yeah, so just put the fingers on the sternum again. So here we've got the two touches, the positive and the negative touch. So my hand up the back is trying to gently sort of press that point of the spine forwards. But these fingers here don't want to press down into the sternum. They want to lift up. They want to lift it up. So here I'm trying to pull my fingers away. I'm trying to encourage that rising from the sternum. So this is worship. This is sacrificing the self on the altar of nobility. So that's really just sort of just forgetting self and just letting your mind become infinite. So becoming natural. And so when I work with people one-to-one, which is what people want nowadays, they want to feel special. Basically, I just spend the session trying to turn them into someone I want to be with, because generally I don't. And so just to get their mind to quieten, to get them to start listening to me and acknowledging that there's someone else in front of them, that they're not the center of the universe. And basically to feel this sort of noble lift. So what I call exposing the prince or the princess. And it's striking when it happens. Sayala, you know, Jishin, who used to come to these sessions. In a sense, she was the best. You know, she'd always arrive depressed and sort of miserable. But then by the end, you know, she'd just turn into a princess. And it was interesting that when it happened, her inclination was to tie her hair up. And then you could see the beautiful extended neck. Really revealing. It's difficult to get it to happen for a man because they're so confused. Yeah, so there's like a flame flickering from here, but there's also a sense of something going in and round. So this rotation in the head, so extending the cervical spine, extending the neck. Yeah, but we don't want this sense of, when you're looking down in meditation, you're meant to be looking like a meter or 2 meters in front of you. So we don't want that looking down to be an act of depression. It's not this passive, oh. It's an extension of the neck really reaching upwards. So the atlas bone, the bone that the cranium sits on top of at the top of the spine, that's also really important. And you just want the feeling that the head is just, it's like those dogs that people have in those toy dog things with the dippy heads that people have in the back of their cars, where the heads just sort of can move in any direction. That's how the head should feel on top of the atlas. So like the atlas is really sort of well lubricated, and it can just allow this fluid motion in any direction. Okay, now let's just bring the hand up at the back. So you're trying to get it opposite the sternum, but the lower sternum, the blade of the sternum, the gladiolus. And then we just want to do a little bit of upper chest breathing. So just trying to get that part of the spine flexing and extending. So the movement's quite small, but so you're breathing in on the extension. So as you lift the chest, you're breathing in, but you're really just trying to fill the upper lobes of the lungs. So it's not from down here anymore. And then let it out, and then just hands on the knees. And then just coming into prayer posture. And just feeling the power of that, because that is really just lifting the energy up into the heart, and then like the middle fingers are just sending this flame of the thymus up. And then just back down again. And then again, just up. So as you bring the hands down, there's almost a sense of deflation, almost like you're sort of leaning forwards a little bit. And then when you bring the hands up, you can really feel as though you're pushing the sacrum underneath the sternum. You're actually leaning back a little bit with the sternum. But this is the sense of the sacrum being beneath the sternum. And a sense that you want to look upwards. And so you really have to just concentrate on extending the neck to balance that. And then down again. And then just try one more. Then we'll stand up. Yeah, so what is it that rises when I bring my hands up and I get into this correct position? It's what I call enthusiasm. So spirit, basically. So enthusiasm just basically means to be possessed by a God. And so to be possessed by spirit. So that's the lightness that we want all the time. And when you get distracted and start thinking to yourself, that will extinguish that. So the thinking mind, that is Satan, the devil. So all evil stems from that. So your mind is empty of thoughts, but full of wonder. In a state of grace and with a sense of wonder. Now let's stand up. Okay, so riding horse, bringing in the legs. So still feeling the sacrum. And then the legs branching out from the sacrum. So my hip bones hold my sacrum loosely, and then my legs come out of the hips. So I want to feel the hips like two hands, loosely holding the sacrum in position. Yeah, so it's just very difficult what we're trying to do, because because of the way our minds have been trained. Yeah, so what needs to happen is this bone needs to sink and relax, basically. So sink down, but also drift forwards so that it feels like it's beneath the sternum here, beneath the chest bone. But what I don't want to do is just put it there, because if I put it there, it's my normal rational mind that's done it. And that will just give me an image. It's like I've thought the correct posture rather than actually acquired it correctly. So you really want to feel this sort of the heavy sacrum just hanging and just slowly sinking, slowly drifting forwards. So it's sort, so when you get there, it sort of takes you by surprise. It's like a gift. It's a gift economy we're interested in, not the normal capitalistic economy, not the normal exchange economy. So I feel the sacrum just heavy, just hanging down. And it's difficult because we're not just one thing. That's the problem. We're many things. Yeah. So here, so when we're meditating and doing this sort of work, we're trying to just become a little less busily active than we normally are. So normally we're like a sort of dog or like an animal that's sort of rushing around, with its tail up in the air and busy and agitated and disturbed. And so in meditation, we're just trying to relax that, but we don't want to relax it such that it kills it. So there's a sense that inside me, there's this sort of animal that's really like a little squirrel or something. It's just really inquisitive and it's just sort of looking around at everything. And then there's another part of me that's just almost inert, almost dead to that. Like you imagine how the bones are compared to like the flesh. So that's like, so I have this small self, if you like, no, good small self, not the ego, that sort of wants to sort of run around and look. It's curious, curious, like the curious cat. Get these cats coming up and down the stairs here. And so that's wanting my tail to go back. That's wanting this to rock forward so that my tail protrudes upwards like a squirrel's tail. And then there's this other part of me, the big self, which is just really like behind me slightly, that's just embracing the situation like the mother that's watching the children play. So we have this child inside that's getting into mischief, but we're also the mother that contains the child. So this is what makes it difficult, really. So in one sense, my sacrum is sinking and my tail is coming under. And in another sense, my tail is going back and sticking up. And so it's always a balance between opposites in Taoism. So when you find something, the Taoist impulse is then to think, oh, now I need to look for the opposite, and then I need to get them in balance. And it will happen naturally, because when you find something and you work on it to start with, it's all exciting and everything, and then you get tired of it, it gets dull, it gets boring. And then often the opposite will actually appear. And then you'll feel shameful because you feel like you're being disloyal. What we want to feel today is just this, it's just relaxing. Everything that we're trying to do should happen naturally, if only we could become quiet here. So when this gets into the right position, then this just begins to blossom. And you become what John called enheartened, emboldened, encouraged, enthused. And this wants to lift. It wants to open up and look upwards. And that's worship. So that's lifting the heart and the mind to God. First commandment. So it has to come, this lifting upwards has to come from the sinking. The becoming lowly. My sacrum, it's trying to just get down into the ground. So this is like the heavier elements, like sort of water and earth. So this is the water that you're pouring into the earth. And then this is the light elements, air and fire. And then that's basically the form. So when you're doing the form, you're just struggling all the time to get your sinking sacrum beneath the blossoming sternum. And then everything that's happening in the upper body is just the expression of your worship, really. It's the energy that's just burgeoning upwards. But it has to be from here. It's not something that you're designing and that you're making. Now let's just try moving a little bit. So just turning now. Again, with this feeling that the sacrum is underneath the action. So the spine is like an arrow. The sacrum is like the arrowhead that's pointing downwards. It's extending into the earth. And then this is all like the feathers at the end of the arrow. The fletched feathers. And just feel how it's your mind is always trying to get this to drift back slightly because it wants to be able to think to itself. And when it's under the sternum and the sternum is just blooming upwards, it can't. It just has to be quiet for a change. If you're thinking to yourself, then you are worshipping the devil. Very simple. And you're poisoning the world. And it makes, you know, when you get it, and this really becomes activated, you get quite breathless. I often used to wonder why John, he'd often, you know, get really out of breath and breathless. And it's just because this area just opens up so much. And it's like, you know, like you're gulping for air almost. So the beauty of this exercise really is that you really are right in the middle of it. You're in the thick of it. You're not behind the world observing it. There's no subject and object. You're just in the middle of the maelstrom. And the world is just swirling around you. And now let's just go into the second one, but keep that feeling of swirling, even though we're now moving the sacrum from side to side. We're not just turning it. I want to feel the turning as still dominating the situation. All the time, just keeping it beneath the heart and the head, so the head cannot think. The cleverer you are, the more well-educated you are, the more fucked up you are. And so really the work commences when you realize that. So my nephew, my little brother's boy, who's got the biggest heart of any I know, has just had the good sense to leave college. And my mother said, she said, he's become his parents' great disappointment. I thought, well, there's hope, there's hope. I told my son, Max, and he just said, oh, fuck, he says, college is for losers. And I thought, yeah, dead right. Okay, now let's just bring it back. Again, just getting this under. Yeah, so when I'm working with people, it's always quite revealing because, you know, we do an exercise and, you know, they get into this sort of enthused heart and heartened state. And then as soon as we change, you know, as soon as I say, okay, let's do a different one, let's do something else, they use the opportunity to draw back into themselves, pull their bum back, start thinking to themselves. It's almost like that is our neutral. That's coming back to something that we consider to be firm ground, and it's not. That's the fantasy. Yeah. So we'd like to be able to switch from one exercise to another without having to retreat to self. And you can use it. You can really concentrate at that point where you're changing, and just really make sure that there's almost like an explosion of heart at that moment. Okay, now let's just figure of 8. But again, just trying not to let, because what tends to happen with the figure of 8, because it's going like this, because it's coming in at the front all the time, it tends to push the sacrum back. So just trying to feel this as though the sacrum is balancing that by just drifting forwards all the time. And it's that drift forwards that keeps that buoyancy in the heart. It's like that clip from YouTube that I sent you of Yeats reading, which you probably didn't bother listening to. And I mean, what I loved about it is that, you know, that it's a wonderful poem, The Lake Isle of Innisfree. And but he talked a bit about what inspired it. And he said he was walking down the Strand one day in London, and he heard a tinkling sound, and he turned towards the sound. He says it was just in a shop window. It's a window display. And there was a jet of water just coming up, and there was like a ping pong ball just balanced on top of the jet of water, bouncing up and down. And that image just sparked what is now considered one of the greatest poems in the English language. But it's just that beautiful image of the spout, the jet of water, the fountain with the heart balanced on top. So that's the feeling. You're sinking here, drills a hole, and this geyser of water is just keeping your heart aloft, buoyant and joyful. I hear it in the deep heart's core. That's how the poem ends. It's quite interesting with like Samuel Beckett, the idol of my youth. You know, at the end, towards the end, he was just reading Yeats all the time. You know, this person that he saw, you know, when he was young, he just hated that sort of conservative romanticism of Yeats. He was all into Joyce and everything. At the end of his life, he learned them off by heart. He could just recite them because he just loved the sounds, the rhythms and the sounds. That's what Yeats is, really. Poetizing reveals the world in its non-presence. So it's energy, it's all to do with energy, rather than the things themselves. Yes, as my hand travels up here, oh, so does something come up my spine and fills the heart and lifts the sternum. As soon as you overdo it, you lose your sacrum. You lose your heaviness. So this is what we have to be really careful of. The lightness must come from your heaviness. Otherwise, it's artificial, it's been man-made, it's been self-produced. So it's my sacrum hanging dispassionately, inertly, heavily, that allows me to come alive here in the right way. So it's basically waving hands in the clouds or the figure of 8 exercise. It's the same thing, really. They're just stylizations of each other. So as one arm comes up, the other arm is reaching down the opposite leg, connecting with the root down there. So it's cross energy, it's like pure cross energy, really, this exercise. Let's just bring it back to riding horse. Try not to look down. It's a difficult one, that. That's my flippant reply to what is the secret of life. Don't look down. If you look down, you'll lose your balance. Let's just try some breathing. So just trying to keep that feeling that your sacrum is beneath the sternum. It's whipping in and out. So here my sternum is just going back a little bit further than the sacrum. And then here the sternum comes forwards a little bit. But they're sort of on average. They're on top of each other directly. We'd like to be able to just feel each vertebra. And so each vertebra like has its own character. And so we'd just like to become a little bit intimate to that. And you can just use touch, you know, so if you can reach it, you can just touch it and just hold it. And just the touch will just wake it up in a way that you're not accustomed to, so you'll be able to feel it. We tend not to feel the things that we're used to. So if you can make something just a little bit unusual, then your sensitivity will waken up. So practice is prayer, practice is worship. And the aim is just to make it as full-time as possible. So all of these principles can just be practiced in whatever you're doing. So you don't have to be doing Tai Chi or sitting on the meditation cushion. So it doesn't matter what you're doing, you can have a little bit of your mind in the heaviness of your sacrum and another little bit of your mind in the lightness of the sternum, the upper sternum. And then you're practicing. And as John used to say, the only way it's going to happen is if you begin to find it really interesting and enjoyable. The way John put it is, you know, you will only succeed at Tai Chi if you fall in love with Tai Chi. And you know what it's like when you fall in love. Life just becomes completely dominated by the beloved. You can't get them off your mind. You desire them all the time. So that's how it should feel with the work. And so if there are chores that you cannot avoid, then you just find a way of working in them. Just back into riding horse. So just getting the riding horse proper, and then last of all, just letting this relax downwards, which will always bring it slightly forwards, basically because of the angle of your thighs. So your knees are the most far forwards part of you, apart from your arms. So you will tend to drift down towards the knees, which will bring you forwards. Feel the heaviness of the sacrum stretching out the lumbar spine, which causes a similar sympathetic stretching in the cervical spine. So the sacrum coming down and forwards echoes into the chin, which pulls in. It's like a sort of bouncy heaviness. It's not a crunchy sort of grinding heaviness. Then you can bring the mind to here, observe it, feel that sort of just lifting upwards. Halev Poreach, the heart blossoms. William Blake's paintings and etchings, and a lot of art, especially from the Romantic period. It's basically they were just having visions because they were living in the heart. So this was the place where they operated from, rather than here or here. And so their world just became populated by visions, by energy that they could see, that was producing pictures. So they're, poets, real poets. And you just want to notice that as soon as you start thinking to yourself, you've just really sullied it. You've just brought it down. You brought it back to self. You've shat on it. So this sort of rising, enthusing courage that comes up you into the sternum and beyond, it just requires a lot of energy. especially sexual energy. Okay, now let's just bring just a bit of mind to the Dantian. So we haven't really touched on that today. So that the Dantian is very much not a bone. The sternum is the bone, the sacrum is the bone. So it's got that sort of hard solidity, that sort of heavy, hard solidity. This is very much alive, very much like a muscle or a sphincter, like a round ring muscle that's tightening into itself all the time. So it's got that sort of rubbery elasticity and livingness. So when this is in the right position, when this is dropping, angling forwards, and it's beneath the sternum, then this will just naturally come in. It won't be able to just flop out, because that requires my bum to stick out. So you get the sense that your hips are just like a girdle, like a container, and the Dantian, the belly, just rolls back into it and is contained. And then you get a sense of the belly lifting, which John was so much into. So my sinking sacrum brings up my belly. And really, it's the Dantian really that sort of holds it all together. It's a bit like the ligament for the skeleton. It's controlling all of that holding ligamental energy. The ligature, the ligament, the religion. You know, it's all got the same roots, yeah? The etymologies, the binding, the connecting. The pulling in, the withdrawing. Okay, now let's just draw it up. So just feel the Dantian, and just with your mind, it's like a sort of grim determination. Something in you just tightens up, and this foot comes up. And then just straightening the legs, but maintaining the sacrum beneath the heart, which will feel like you're leaning back. So there's always the sense that your sacrum is undermining the sternum and maintaining its buoyancy. So innocent and infinite. It's a beautiful combination of words. Can't remember where I came across it, but so this sense that your innocence is also your infinity. You are infinite. John used to say, you know, the big breakthrough in Tai Chi comes when you have that flash of insight, that lightning flash of insight, that you are actually infinite. And he always used to say that that is basically the insight that you need to get your inspiration from the stars, from this, rather than from this. He says, if you're always connecting to your root, then you will be very limited and very finite. But if you make this connection to the stars, to the sky, to the heavens, to God, then there's a sense in which your energy is infinite. But this will always try and bring it down to the finite. And so that's the enemy. You are your own worst enemy.